Hi, my name is Ray Jones and I'm Professor of Health Informatics at Plymouth University in Devon, UK. And just short videos just about a viewpoint on randomized controlled trials and ehealth and mhealth. This is based on my sort of experience over quite a few years of having carried out a good number of RCTs and other types of eHealth studies, and it's partly been motivated by the discussions that I've seen on the mHealth Summit in the USA, and also partly motivated by my sort of continued thinking about this over the last 10 years or so. I do hope you'll comment. So tweet me on rjones at Plymouth. rjones Plymouth, or email me at ray.jones@plymouth.ac.uk. I'll put those up again at the end. Thought I'd start with this picture. This is a picture of James Lind giving lemon juice to sailors on board the Salisbury, which set sail from Plymouth in May 1747. This is often thought to be one of the first clinical trials, if not the first clinical trials. James Lind allocated 2 sailors to get cider or elixir of vitriol or vinegar, seawater, citrus fruit, or a purgative mixture. So a six-arm trial basically. By the time the HMS Salisbury returned to Plymouth at the end of May 1747, the 2 assigned to citrus fruit had recovered. They didn't get scurvy. Obviously, his study didn't get ethical approval. It wasn't registered. The sailors weren't randomized. He didn't report it using the consort, and he didn't publish the results for 6 years. But interestingly, the implementation of the change was a lot quicker. I think it's just a sort of an interesting example to know that the idea of randomized trials, or at least trials of that sort where you've got comparison groups, have been around for quite a long time. Clearly much more in recent years with the Cochrane collaboration and so on. And the consort diagrams, we've specified in more detail how RCTs should be taken forward. But coming up to date, I mean, the situation now is, of course, that we're looking at healthcare, which is supported through the use of apps, supported through the use of websites, and people are saying, well, there are problems with using RCTs in eHealth and mHealth, and here are 4 of the fairly well-rehearsed arguments about using RCTs in eHealth and mHealth. And one of the main ones is the speed of research compared to the speed of technology development. People just say, well, by the time you've done your RCT, everything's moved on. I've developed new apps keep developing all the time, websites keep developing, our methods keep developing. By the time you've done your RCT, the results have no meaning at all. So it comes down to the durability of the research question. You've got to ask a question which has some sort of shelf life, that's all. Another problem is contamination. People say, well, okay, well, you can do your study of this particular app or this particular website, but how do you stop other people getting access to it? What about the other apps and other things that they have access to? And that is a problem. So how do you actually stop contamination of your control group? And then a fourth big problem is, what do you do about blinding and dropout? You've got to have a reasonable control group, such that if you put people into the intervention group, if you recruit them to the study and then you randomize them to intervention or control, and they get the do nothing control, and they say, well, hang on, I wanted to get access to this new online CBT for depression, and you're saying, I'm just going to go back to my GP as before. They drop out. So you get increased dropout in the control group, and your RCT is not much point. So you've got to have a control which has some sort of equipoise with the intervention. So you've got to find a research question then which can say, well, by comparing this fairly similar control to this intervention, it still tells me something really useful. What about this question about how long does an RCT take? They don't have to take so long. I mean, you could do an RCT next week. I could set up a website, 2 versions of a website, and as people come into the website, they get recruited to version A, version B. I can get the results, and within 2 weeks I could have published the difference between those two websites. So an RCT doesn't have to take a long time. Of course, if you want a long follow-up and you want to look at the outcome, the health outcomes, you might be looking at an RCT which takes 20 years, during which time, of course, you know, the ehealth or the mhealth will have changed enormously. But it's my impression, my understanding, that website developers are actually continually doing randomized controlled trials to compare different designs. As we all know, as researchers, you know, what often takes the time is actually getting the funding, getting the ethical approval, registering the trial, allowing enough time for follow-up analysis, publishing, and so on. So you do have to have clearly a question and a method and a time scale which is appropriate to the research question. But that's possible. That's possible. I mean, I did a study back in which was published in 1999, so that's 13 years ago now, where the question was, is it worthwhile tailoring information for patients with cancer using their medical record? At the time we were using a standalone touchscreen computer in a hospital clinic, so that technology is probably out of date, but the research question is still valid. And the answer, by the way, was yes, it was worthwhile tailoring, and that research question still holds today. So that study had some shelf life. It's worth considering, you know, what's the problem of not doing an RCT? You know, there are problems in doing RCTs, but what's the problem of not doing an RCT? Well, the big problem is placebo. You still see people saying, well, here's a before and after trial. This is their status beforehand. They used the app, they used the website, and afterwards everything was it had improved. Well, so what? So what? Because we all know that the powerful effect of placebo. We know that if you recruit people, you give them some tender, loving care and attention, you've got an experimental effect, they improve. Whatever it is you do, doesn't matter what you do. That doesn't really help us. Also, other things are happening while they're in this study. Maybe the health service has changed, maybe new drugs have come out, maybe there's been a campaign on television about something or other. Everything else changes. You have to do a randomized control trial if you want to be able to attribute the impact to a particular intervention. So I don't know what the alternatives are. Qualitative studies can tell you what people think about it, how they use it. You can do observational studies, but if you really want to know impact of effect, you have to do an RCT, I think. So how would you go about doing these RCTs? What's the first stage of any RCT? Well, you're likely to start off with an exploratory refinement of what is known. So you might be doing some sort of user-led exploration of needs to see what people already use, what's useful, what information, support and communication do patients need. And one possibility for a research question for RCT in eHealth or mHealth is to step back a bit from the actual app, the actual website, the technology, and maybe develop a functional specification, some sort of passport to care, something which you might give to the patients and say, look, this is, as a group, you've said this is what you've found useful, and here's some apps, here's some websites that will actually meet your need for doing that, and here's what the way you might use them, and guide people. And you could give that a functional spec to developers as well, and saying that's what people want. You make sure that your apps do that. And then you could randomize patients to either having or not having the spec, the guide, the passport to care. And so what you would be testing would be supporting people in their use of apps, their use of eHealth care. Another way of stepping back from the apps, stepping back from the technology, is maybe to provide eHealth support. So I'm quite keen to get novice users of the internet, novice users of apps, to be able to use this technology. And one thing that you might do is to randomize people to having support or no support, or possibly different levels of support. Clearly the research question there is, does support help rather than does the app help? But nevertheless you are able to make use of the apps that are available at any one time. One problem of all eHealth and mHealth research whether it's RCT or any other things, that we must always consider, I think, is this idea of e-health inequalities. By promoting e-health and mhealth services, we may be making things worse for those who don't have access. We may be making things worse for the elderly, the poor, the disadvantaged. And so we always need to keep that in consideration. And just a particular gripe of mine is that, for example, some of the excellent statistics that are reported, for example, by Pew, they always tend to report them amongst the internet users, and they really should report them amongst all the population, because not only do the way people use them vary by age, but the number of people using it varies by age. We should always see those figures by the whole population, not amongst just internet users. And we should be thinking about how we can address equity as well as effectiveness for those who have access. So, in summary, my view is that RCTs are still necessary alongside any user-centered iterative development of technology. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to keep RCTs, but of course you need to choose the right research questions, and you need to hope that the referees considering your applications do consider maybe the principles of RCTs, and that they're not too rigid in treating an RCT in eHealth or mHealth like a drug trial. Because sometimes you want to do maybe intention to treat analysis, and maybe you also want to do some as treated analysis, and the purists will say, oh no, you can't do that in the same study, but you do hope that people will have some flexibility and go back to basics and first principles. So what do you think? RCTs for eHealth or mHealth? And if not, how are you going to assess the effectiveness? Do tweet, do email me. Thanks a lot. Bye.